Generally speaking, we've all been using resumes whenever we apply for a job, but how relevant really is the resume today?
I think resumes are important to you to give people at least a glimpse in terms of what they're getting into. But I think it's also two ways. When you have to prepare a resume, that gives you a chance to get to know the company you're getting into. That's the reason why we keep saying things like do your research, find out what the values of the company is, what the culture is going to be like, what the job is going to be like that you're going into. And I think a lot of people don't do this research, and they should, because resumes should be highly customized to the company that you're applying to. A lot of times people have this misunderstanding that, it's one resume sent to like 100 companies, and then they just sort of, you
Yeah.
know, like a machine gun, just shoot everywhere and expect a
One size
bullseye.
fits all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sort of idea one size fits all. It doesn't work that way, not even for a resume. So I have like different tips for people who are going to, like, say, conventions where people are mass recruiting, and you're applying, say, through LinkedIn, or even if you're applying directly to the company, there should be different levels of customization that you're doing.
But
Right?
resumes are still, people still go through resumes. I mean, considering you just
Yeah.
mentioned LinkedIn.
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is a form of resume anyway. It's an online form of resume. But I think LinkedIn is interesting because it combines that traditional element of a resume, but you have things like testimonial and also networking. So I can see the people that you're connected to, what your interests are, right? And how active you are. So
Okay,
I think
so on that though, that means if I have a resume, if I have a LinkedIn, why do I still need to send a resume?
it depends, because, I would think now Malaysia being 1 year into COVID, that we're ready for online learning, and we're not. And that's the truth, that there are going to be a lot of companies and people out there who are not tech savvy, who are not going to places like, Job Street and LinkedIn to look for candidates.
Oh.
So that's also including sort of going in and actually posting it or handing it on, dropping off at a desk, hoping it gets on to the desk of the HR person, whoever.
And depending on the culture of the company, sometimes that works better, right? You've got the personal touch, and also depending on your luck, you may be able to catch the HR manager and you can have an interview on spot. And that's the reason why a lot of companies still have walk-in interviews.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
So there are still, traditional concepts like that, because you have that human touch. Because at the end of the day, you need to understand the role of your resume or the role of your CV is to land you an interview. So you need to first diagnose the problem. So if you're not getting a call back for an interview, that means there's something wrong with your resume or your CV.
Right.
If you're landing an interview and you're not getting a call back, that means there's something wrong with your interview, right? So sometimes when you have that personal touch where you're handing in your resume in person, you're in a way already going in for an interview, because you can meet the people on the spot. And I've done this when I was looking for places to work, right? When I was in university, we had field trips, and we went to an auditing company because I studied analytical economics. So we had options to go into banking or auditing or finance. So we went to a top 4 auditing company. And when that field trip was over, I realized very quickly, auditing is not for me. Despite people talking about, it's one of the best companies to work for, it's like you get paid really well. Because when I walked in there and I realized what they advertised online was this idea of professionalism and performance and being, in a big name company. And I realized the culture of the company was that everybody was working, nobody was talking to anybody, and it was pin drop silent.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know, that wasn't a company I want to work in.
Okay.
Things like that. There are benefits to traditional ways of doing things, because things like this, sometimes you don't know until you get the job, and then you realize, oh no.
Wrong place.
Right. And the resume is the way you start everything with, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you're walking into the lobby and you've got your bright pink manila folder with your neon name on it, because you're going to hand it.
Did you see my manila folders? I mean, what in the world? Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
I'm one of those, right? Like, I'm one of those like really fun people. Like if I was still in class now, I would be one of those students with like funny hats on or like funny headbands just to crack a laugh.
I would love to see what your CVs used to look like. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so let's go take a look at the idea of the resume content itself. So we get the idea that there's different ways and different versions of a resume, right? But with the actual content of it, what do employers really want to see or know?
Okay, so there's the professional answer to that and the real answer to that.
Wait, what?
So the professional answer to that is people want to see your skills and your experience on your resume, right? But depending, again, on the culture of the company that you're walking in and also getting a job in Malaysia versus, say, Canada or the US, we still want to know things like your IC number, what race you are, what religion you are you married, not married. Even, and if you have a picture, it's a deal maker or a deal breaker. A lot of these types of requirement has evolved in a lot of markets where, you are no longer required to even put your gender, if you're applying for a job in Canada, US, or especially European countries. But the Asian culture, we still want to know all those things. I think the only thing that we don't have to put down is our weight.
That's
nice. Right? So pretty much any other criteria is very important. I would say basic requirement is, of course, your name, some of your working experience. There is some debate in terms of how much work experience you should put down or how much you should share. But I think it's just there needs to be a balance between trying to paint a picture of your skills and the general aesthetics of how your resume looks like. Because sometimes people put so much information that it clutters your resume that it doesn't look appealing anymore.
Right. Yeah, okay.
So there is a fine balance between the two.
Okay, on that though, sometimes they say it needs to be, let's say it's sending a resume out, right? It's within don't know how many kilobytes or whatever. What does that mean? Is it 2 pages? Should you fit everything into 2 pages or what?
Is that, hang on, I got to ask JD, is that like an email specific thing or an online specific thing?
Sometimes they ask me to send in like, okay, I'm not saying I'm applying
before,
for any
before,
jobs.
before.
Okay, when, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I apply for something, it's always like, please make sure your resume is within don't know how many kilobytes and everything. And I'm emailing them, right? I don't know whether it's about their servers being full or they want to see everything within a few pages.
Right. So that's actually several parts to the answer as well. Usually companies that have that is because they have high volume of number of candidates. So what it happens is it goes through a system. So of course, there's a limitation in terms of how big of a memory they can take in. Okay. Secondly, there is a difference between a resume and a CV. So a resume is about 2 pages max. A CV could be 2 to 7 pages. Right?
Oh, I always thought resume was just a fancy name for CV.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was like the same thing.
There is a difference. So the amount of information you put in a CV will be significantly more. So you can actually put in things like subjects that you've studied when you were at the university, especially some people who have a diploma, a bachelor's, and say even 2 master's degrees. So you want to put your thesis statement, maybe a little bit of the results. So not just your CGPA. So your CV is going to be a more padded version of what you do, especially if you're from like the academic line where you have different researchers or you put different awards. So that's the purpose of a CV. It's significantly longer. So a resume is a 1 to 2 pager where it's just information that people need to know. So even if you're expanding and talking about, I was a DJ at LITE FM, you want to put just 1, 2, maximum 3 details about what you did there. Right? But in CV, you can expand significantly more to paint a picture of the role and the different types of project you worked on and the things you want to highlight on. So when there's a limitation, they're not talking about CV, they're talking about a resume. So when you go for the interview, you should have your resume, your CV, and all the certificates that you want to prove.
Why did no one tell me this? Like, honestly, even researching for this to sort of think about what would be the right kinds of questions to ask you, not once did I see anywhere there is a difference between curriculum vitae and resume.
Correct, yeah.
That's the reason why I have a job, because people don't know that, and I've got to educate people, and I've got to correct people.
I'm so glad we know you.
The perfect person.
Okay, so let me go back to, you were saying that you had, when I asked about when we submit our resumes, what do employers really want to see or know? You gave us your professional answer, but you said that there was an alternative answer to that as well. So what's the alternative sneaky answer or answer?
So there's a bit of strategy in terms of the things you want to highlight, right? I'll give you a very basic example. Like, do you or do you not want to share with your future employer your hobbies, right? Ooh, so some people will tell them like, oh, I have these interests. But keep in mind, every information you share in your resume paints a particular image in their head. So, and the thing is, people don't know who's reading it. If you're talking about HR managers, they could be in their 30s, 40s, or even older, right? So, which means if you say things like, my interests include playing video games, shopping, and sleeping. And I've had people say sleeping.
Oh my
right?
goodness.
So the image that you're painting, you're painting and your potential employer, depending on certain biases they may have, is that this person may be very lazy, or this person is really into fun and games, or doesn't work professionally, or is very likely going to come into work late because that person is busy staying up all night and sleep, and has trouble waking up in the morning. So then I would have to question, what is the value of sharing your interest like that? So the strategy behind it is that if you share things like, for example, my hobbies include traveling, reading, and hiking. So that paints the picture where you're very curious, and that you're likely very fit, and you are very well-rounded, and educational or educated or smart, right?
And if you travel, that means you're willing to travel for work as well, in a way.
Yeah. And that you're willing to travel for work. There is a specific thing that you can say. Are you willing to relocate? You can say yes or no. Do you have transportation? Yes or no. Because certain jobs require you to travel and also to relocate. So you can put that down directly in your resume already.
I gotta write all this down.
That's so brilliant. Fascinating. So basically what you're saying is like, if you are going to list something like hobbies, find words that are the most general, which have the sort of biggest amount of people thinking travel means travel that way, as opposed to travel a really obscure way, right? So that you don't let them paint a picture in their mind that isn't what you're talking about. Or for example, if JD wrote knitting and football, now I might hire him on a base of knitting because I have resonance with that. But football, I might go, oh God, another bloke who likes football.
Right.
But the chances of that happening, like finding somebody who likes exactly the same hobbies as you do, is going to be very difficult, right? You would have to list 100 different hobbies. But so in general assumption we make.
So you think don't put hobbies at all?
No, I'm a big fan of putting hobbies down.
Right.
I'm just saying, I think we need to, there are more things to consider, right? Strategically, when we're preparing resumes, based on the information we put out. It's the same like when we are talking about our previous experiences. A lot of times, especially with people with a lot of experience, or people who have been in one company for a very long time, most likely you have done a lot of things under that company, right? And the information that we're trying to put in onto the resume could be very specific to that company that nobody else understands. Like, for example, if I work in an accounting company and I talk about reconciliation inventory files to manage INR market, for example, that will be an instance where if somebody else is not in the finance department, because you're trying to apply, say, for a job in training or teaching, they're going to look at what do you mean by reconciliation and what is this INR market, right? Which could be a terminology that's often used in your company that nobody else gets. And this is a mistake that a lot of people make, that it has no value. You're taking up real estate space in your 2-page or 1-page resume. You got to make sure whatever information you're putting in counts. And a lot of people are just putting in information for the sake of putting in information.
No, and also people think like the more information I put in and the thicker it is, it looks more impressive.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the fine line that you have, right? Between aesthetics and information.
So I was actually, what you've just been talking about, I was going to ask you how to create the perfect resume. And you've already said, like with hobbies, be careful of what you actually put down there to give the right kind of impression or not give the wrong one. You've just said also, don't be so niche specific in terms of what you've actually done in the past, because it might not be relevant to the company.
Specific, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, company specific, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what other things go into making, sort of creating the perfect resume?
So a lot of people judge resumes on like what it looks like, right? So that's the reason why you have a lot of services now where they're offering, we'll write a resume for you, and you have also applications like, for example, Canva. even Microsoft Office that offers templates that you can get for free to make your resume look nicer, right? So I would say one of the things that you can do as well is update your resume so it looks a little bit more modern. Because there are a lot of resumes that are still circulating that is typed out, unformatted in Microsoft Word, right?
Sorry, carry on. I was just clearing my throat. Font 10 to fit everything in. Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Exactly. But like the more things you've done and the more things you want to do, the smaller the font gets, right? And then we forget that the person reading it may or may not be able to see it with his or her glasses, right?
We know.
And another thing that we do, so again, there is a fine line between the two. And that's the reason why I would probably say, for example, okay, so we don't want too many words, but we need enough words that it can be understood. So one experiment that I did was I had a participant of mine who had created and updated her resume. And I took that resume and I passed it to somebody who was older, right? So I'm 30 this year and I passed it to somebody who was 50. And I said, hiring managers can be people of all ages, or the person interviewing you can be of any age. So I passed it to her and I said, tell me what you understand by this section. Because everything was icon based. So my hobbies include a picture of a camera, a picture of a Facebook logo, and an icon of something else, right? I think it was Pinterest's logo. And I showed her this and I said, so tell me what you understand by this. And then she goes, okay, I know that's Facebook and that's it.
Right.
So sometimes, things it gets lost in translation because we assume people are going to know this is a Pinterest logo, this is a Facebook logo, and this is photography, or the picture of a camera means photography, right? And that's information lost because with us trying to stylize and show people the creative or artsy side of us, we forget that there are people who reading your resume who have no idea what it means and it represents. So then we go back to the same problem, right? It's just a waste of real estate.
Would you suggest then that if you've sort of done your resume out, to give it to your auntie or your grandma and also maybe your younger sister's friend to have a read and go, how much of that did you understand?
Oh yeah, absolutely. A fresh pair of eyes works best, right? Because when we are reading something, we're reading it with our own personal bias. So when we read certain things, we know exactly what we mean by this. When an average person would have no idea what you mean. And I think part of the problem is we always assume our interviewer to be smart, right? Supposed to know.
Don't hold back, Alex. Don't hold back.
Yeah,
that happens. Right? So we make assumptions, certain level of assumptions. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. Certain things, it needs to be clear, concise, but simple, right? You don't have to use bombastic words to show, my language capability is a 10 out of 10.
So basically, also what I'm getting from this is, my takeaway is the gatekeepers who first see the CVs might not know what the job requires. They're just clearing this to be able to read and understand it and then pass it on. And if that's the case, I just need the gatekeeper to kind of go, oh, this one looks nice because I can understand it and it looks pretty or whatever. It goes into the yes pile. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. Because think about it, right? If you're applying to company ABC, there are likely only 5-6 applicants, right? So that person has time to read through every single one of them and call up, each individual and ask, okay, we're planning to have an interview. Can you come into these dates? But if you're talking about large companies, right, popular companies, right, on average, they get about 5,000 to 6,000 applicants a day, right?
What?
So can you imagine the volume and how many get rejected, right? And they get rejected. And that's the reason why, there is no personal touch, right? There isn't a person that's going through thousands and thousands of applications a day. They have a system, right? An electronic system that does it for them. That's the reason why there are limitations to it. So that's the reason why, to bypass the system, you need to do your research, and also included in the research is an understanding of the job description. Because if you're not using certain keywords, the right keywords that they're looking for, either experience or things that you're willing to do, then it's just an automatic, thank you very much. We're going to keep this in the vault. And even, and if an opening like this, similar to this opens, you'll be in contact.
Right, yeah.
But the vault is always full.
Right. Okay. So to make sure that we get noticed, what information must be included? And I mean, included in the physical one that you go to the office and hand over where you're seeing a person, and the one that JD was talking about, which is you have X amount in the file,
the two pager. Yeah.
So how do you make sure the bot recognizes all the right things and the person recognizes all the right things?
All right. So it's your personal information. So personal information, name, date of birth or age, because that matters. If your gender is easily identifiable, then great. You need your picture. You need, of course, then your contact details, email, phone number. I don't suggest you putting your social media contact in because you never know what's in it. So don't do that.
Right.
You need your references, so people that they can call to verify your information.
Mm-hmm.
So that you have to include either their email address or their phone number. Then, of course, you need to highlight your past experience in your education. So let's go one by one. So your education should be highest one first, and then whatever comes next. So it'll be master's, bachelor's, and then diploma and A levels, right? If there's too much space, drop whatever's not important, because I don't care what you got.
So you don't go all the way to primary school, UPSR,
you don't care about that.
Who cares about primary school, right? If you're a fresh graduate, then sure, like probably SPM and your diploma or your bachelor's matter, right? Because you don't have too many. But if you're at the master's, PhD level, forget it, right? Nobody's going to look at how many A's you got for your PMR, right?
Yeah, okay. That's brilliant.
Okay.
Right? And then depending, if you don't have a lot of work experience, like for example, if you're applying for a job in customer service, but then your work experience is something like a barista, right? And you don't do a lot of things other than make coffee. So then you want to pad up your education a little bit more. So if you have your final year project, put in just the title of it, what you've done. Of course, you put in your CGPA, which is also something else we're going to talk about. Put in your CGPA only if it's above 3. If it's below 3, omit that. Tell them in person what happened and why it's below 3, right? Because 3 is sort of the general acceptable CGPA, right?
Generally, in my case, I don't put a CGPA. Okay, got it. All right.
That's generally. So 3.0 is second class lower, right? CGPA. Some companies, like really, really big companies, will require people to have first class honors. Even that is easy. Depending on the university, first class honors could be anything from 3.8 to a 3.6. And that's a huge difference.
Does this only apply to MNCs hiring highly skilled people, or it's just like across the board?
It happens when companies can afford to want the cream of the crop.
Okay, all right.
Right. So companies where everybody's competing to work in that company, they can afford to put in certain requirements, because that's one layer of filter already. So they don't get 1,000 requests a day, but also they see it as like a privilege, working in the company. So we want the best people in the team. So sometimes people see that as an academic achievement. But I know certain companies, like for example, Google and Facebook, are moving away from the idea of CGPAs, right? To a certain extent, they're also moving away from academic qualifications. They're now looking at your experience.
It's about time.
This is where, yeah. So, and there are companies that don't look at bachelor's or diplomas anymore. There are companies out there that look at certifications. Like ACCA is a professional certification. So if you had completed, say, your SPM, and then you did your A levels and you went straight for an ACCA, bypassing your bachelor's, that's also recognized. So there are more and more companies moving in that way, and more companies recognizing and valuing experience. So in this particular case, you want to omit your education if you don't have any, and just concentrate on the experience that you have or any certifications that you may have that will add value to that job.
When it comes to experience, though, what happens if someone, because there's a vast difference between someone who doesn't have an experience or someone who's worked in a lot of different companies in a lot of different fields. Do you put everything or just very target specific?
Right. So if you don't have enough experience, you want to, there are ways for you to do your resume, right? There's the function method where you talk about if there are gaps in, for example, I worked here 2 years and then I didn't do anything for 2 years and then I got another job for 2 years. So if you were to follow the chronological order, right, by right resume should be written in 2008, I did this until, and I was here from 2008 to 2010. And 2010, I was working here until 2015, and 2015 until current, I'm here. So if you have any unexplained gaps in your resume, then you should not be following the chronological order. You should.
Sorry, that's just blown me away, because that's something that I always like worried about, like the sort of the gaps in the things and how you kind of, what do you explain? And I love the fact that don't follow that model. It's as simple as that. Sorry, I just had a light bulb moment. I've got a friend who's got a problem with that, and I can go home today now and just go,
tell her you don't need to follow that system.
Exactly. Right. So sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So yeah, there are ways to circumvent and move around certain gaps in your resume. So then it would be following what you have been doing, right? So you don't have to follow a chronological order. You can just pick and choose certain jobs that may have either the biggest position you may have had. So for example, if you were working as a customer service representative at a call center, that would be probably placed as something that has a higher value in terms of job or work experience as opposed to a barista. All right. So you may have been a barista, a food panda food delivery rider. You could have sold vegetables for the wet market. And this happens especially in a time like COVID, right? Where you may not have a secure job. So you may be doing a lot of odd jobs.
Gigs, yeah.
Right? Like different gigs, or you may have multiple jobs, at the same time.
Yeah.
So I would say pick and choose what is most relevant and adds value to the job that you're trying to apply for. And this is where it's important, because each company that you're applying for should be a different type of resume.
Right.
Because even if you're applying, say, to a company in the same industry, but they're two different companies. So let's say if I'm applying to Air Asia versus I'm applying to Malaysia Airlines, assuming that we're now flying and the economy is booming, right? So you have a choice between these two companies. The same resume should not go out to these two companies, right? Although they are in the same industry. Because if you look at the values of a company like Air Asia, right, you would describe them as fun, spunky, probably a bit crazy, very people-oriented. So when you design a resume, you can have a little bit more fun with it, right? It doesn't have to be a very traditional resume where you're sticking to white, blue, black colors, right? Very, very corporate colors, right? So you can have a little bit more fun in Asia, and it's usually appreciated, and you will stand out, right? So they enjoy that creativity. But you can't do the same thing in Malaysian Airlines because it doesn't have that same culture, that same values. So you have to stick to the traditional blue, white, black color schemes. When you even word your sentences, if for example, if you're describing yourself as a barista in Air Asia, you can submit a resume saying something like, I make really good coffee or damn good coffee for a living.
Right.
That can probably pass. The person reading it will probably have a chuckle. But, if you try using a word like that in Asia, they're going to go like, why is this person swearing? And I was like, oh, this is so unprofessional. So that sort of culture matters, So we need to look at and understand that one resume does not fit all, even if it's in the same industry, because cultures and values matter, and that represents the people in it as well.
It's like people, how you speak to different people, you have to use different methods
way.
to warm up to them, right? I see.
Yeah, you wouldn't speak
Exactly.
to your grandma the way you speak to me, right?
No.
Okay.
No, exactly.
This is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Okay, so given all that you've told us so far, what do you think is the most critical mistake that you see time and again in our resumes?
Okay. This is going to blow your mind.
Already mind-blowing, but carry on.
I don't know. Incorrect personal information.
What?
Yeah, I know. The most common mistake that people make is not updating their personal information. There are people who like to change their phone numbers every few weeks, every few months.
Right. Okay.
They don't update their resume. So there's no way of contacting that candidate for an interview.
Oh my goodness. That to me is like the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
Basic.
Yeah. Right? It's so basic, and I corrected a lot of resumes, and I check phone numbers, and I go like, why is it missing a number? And they have a look.
Goodness.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So on that note, also that means when you put in your referees' numbers as well, you better check their phone numbers are correct as well, right?
Yeah, and that they're still working when you claim they are.
Wow.
Right. So the thing about references is, you are sharing personal information out, right? So before you do get their consent and say, and this is where I detest the idea, if you're sending out your resume to 100 companies, you're sharing not only your personal information, but their personal information as well.
Okay.
Right?
That's true.
So I am a reference. I'm put under reference for quite a few of my previous participants. And I always tell them, if you're submitting your resume, you better tell me who you're submitting your resume to, so I know to expect a call. And also, please refresh my memory on who you are. Because most likely the reference that you're going to put in is somebody from your university days, right? For fresh graduates. And they go through thousands of students a year. And you may have graduated 4 or 5 years ago, right? Don't expect, that they're going to remember one day somebody goes, hi, you're listed as a reference from, Arisha Alex, and that person goes, who?
Yeah. So basically, don't think you're as memorable as you think you are, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're applying for a job and you're going to submit your resume, give your reference a call and tell them, hey, please expect a call from this company. I'm going for this position. Chat. If they can't remember who you are, just say, like for me, I was a crazy girl with red hair walking around university. And most of the time, I don't remember people, but people remember me. Right?
Okay.
So
what else we got? Okay, so personal information, basic is phone number. Not getting in touch with your referees about the fact that you're actually going to be sending out the information. What else is there?
Yep. Also something really funny. Sometimes people customize their. Okay, so one thing that sometimes people don't have is a cover letter, which you should include with your resume.
Right.
And your cover letter should be more personalized, right? So it should contain the name of the recruiting manager or the HR manager that you're sending your letter to.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're sending a mass number of CVs out or resumes out, people tend to forget. So to change certain information in your resume or your CV. So essentially, you may be sending a letter to address to AirAsia, and you're sending it to all of AirAsia's competitions.
Right. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
So if you get that address, like how would you feel? So certain things that you can start a CV with would be something like, I am honored and pleased to apply for the position as executive in your esteemed company, right? And then cut and paste name of the company.
Yes.
And you get a competition's, name.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So what does that show?
That you don't care. You're not particular about the details.
Exactly.
I'm just really glad that we're going to have a recording of this for us to do a list afterwards, because there's so much to remember.
I could update my CV, man. Oh my God.
Can you share with us a story of like the worst ever example of a resume you've ever gotten, and as the perfect example of how not to write a resume?
Good God. I have seen my fair share. I'm just trying to recall what are some really horrible things. I don't know. Like, I don't think I've seen one resume that's been like the worst or terrible, but there were probably a few things that made me cringe. Something like, for example, in your resume, you can put under your skill level things like, your language proficiency, right? So you can say like BM, you give yourself like a 9 out of 10. In English, you give yourself also a 9 out of 10. And then you send me a resume and cover letter that's just filled and riddled with grammatical errors. And I'm just going, a 9 out of 10? Really?
Yes.
So,
okay. Yeah.
Basic like that.
Pay attention.
I don't know. Like I just remember one story about it's a noble story. Like it was a student of mine who had written in his cover letter saying that he wants to show that he's a very determined and hardworking person. And in trying to explain how he demonstrated hard work and demonstration, he started talking about how he worked really hard to buy his first motorbike and how that wasn't an easy feat. So in theory, it sounds really nice, but when it up being translated on paper, like the first draft, it's just starting to sound a lot more about why he really wanted the motorbike and how that was his dream motorbike, and why he didn't want to borrow money or steal money to buy that motorbike. And it was a lot about that motorbike. I remember that. And that's when, are you selling yourself or are you selling the motorbike? Because I'm so...
Oh gosh. Okay. So there's so much information in this. One thing I wanted to ask you and touch on was, we've mentioned this before a few times about references. So how important are references or your referees in terms of choosing,
Okay. So it is important. Most companies should do their due diligence by calling up your references and finding out and verifying certain information, right?
Do they do that? Do they always do that?
I've received at least 2-3 calls from from few big companies here, so I know they are calling up. But I think it's also your luck. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. So I would always say err on the side of caution and put in your references and let them know to expect phone call. If they don't, then it's okay. If there are ways to go about not sharing your references, mainly if you don't get their consent. All right. So if you're going to a convention and you're sending out mass number of resumes, then you can say, this is my reference, this is his name, this is his position in that company or in the university, if you want to contact him. And then so sort of like please PM. In a way, you're saying available upon request. So then you don't have to give that person's personal information out.
Make or break though?
So yeah.
How important?
Yeah. Is what they say so important that you get hired?
I cannot hear you, and I'm not sure why.
Can you hear Asha?
Can you hear me? Yes.
I wish I can hear.
It's happening again. Hold on. Are the referees so important that it could be make or break? That means you need to coach your references, say this about me,
I mean, it's like, how important is a review at a restaurant before you eat it? Or, when you're waiting or something before you buy it.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's important to you, then it is. If it isn't, and you think the product is good and willing to take a gamble, then you will, right? But a lot of times, you will want to read the reviews. You do want to drop a review as well. So depending on the quality of what that your reference or your referee says, yeah, it can make a break. If you have a referee that says, oh my God, she was one of the best employees we've ever had, and I was really sad to see her go. And in fact, we made her a counter offer, but she said that, she's been here for a very long time and she wanted to explore other opportunities out there. And I wish you would come back. If you have a referee that's saying something like that, wouldn't that create, an impression of like, wow,
that would be amazing. Do people like that exist though?
Do people
that
say stuff like
they're
this?
nice enough that when they get spurned, that they'll say they got spurned?
Like this? Yeah.
There are. Like, it depends how close you are. So picking the right referee matters as well, right? So there is a balance, again, between picking a referee that has a position in that company. And typically when you talk position, and there are companies that are looking for the quality of the referee. So if the referee is a colleague of yours, that matters slightly less compared to a referee who was your boss.
Right. So would I put JD down as my referee, or would I go to Steve, who's my boss, or would I go to Keith, who's my producer?
Or the CEO.
Yeah. Who would I go to?
I would not recommend the CEO because there's a very high likelihood he's not going to entertain the call. But it should be your immediate boss. So whoever is managing both both of you should be the best person to be your referee. Unless that person has left, then a colleague. But it's best when it's a person that you have worked with and that can testify in terms of the quality of the work that you deliver.
Okay.
And usually we will have 2 references, right? It's best to not have both from the same company, right? So it should be one from LITE FM, one from like Discovery Channel or something.
Right. So if the boss that I was working with has left, like, it's still fine to use them, right? Because they held that position. They're just no more in that company. So that doesn't matter, right?
Right. So you can just say former manager.
Okay. So, Alex, you've given us so much amazing information, and I'm still blown away with the fact that a CV isn't a resume. Yeah. Okay. But if you could do the elevator pitch of what's your advice to us when it comes to writing our resumes?
Okay. Elevator pitch, huh? Okay. So I would probably say the biggest advice I can give anybody going into the job market, regardless of your experience or if you are a fresh graduate, do your research. Customize and personalize your CV. It is not about the quantity of companies you apply for. It's about the quality of your application per company. That will increase your chances of being employed.
Wow.
Wow,
brilliant.
Fantastic. And get your personal information correct.
Exactly.
Do not make that mistake, right?
Mistakes, my God. Spot on to the point. We absolutely love single thing you said today.
Alex, you're amazing. This is like seriously mind-blowing. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be able to share all this knowledge with people.